a statewide. Jenn Hill is a consultant with Five Lakes Energy, a statewide energy policy think tank focusing on energy policy and analysis. She has 25 years of experience in government, business, nonprofits, and philanthropy. Most recently, she served for 2 years on the UP Energy Task Force, looking at our region's future energy needs and options. She is in her second term as a Marquette City Commissioner since 2018. She earned her master's in environmental planning at MIT and a BA cum laude from Barnard College. A 4-H kid with family roots in the industrial and agricultural Midwest, Ms. Hill is the 3rd generation in her family to fish in the UP and the first lucky enough to live here. Jenn has asked that if you are coming with questions, please add those to the chat now so that she can address them throughout her presentation. You are also welcome to add questions to the chat during the presentation, and I will periodically share those with her so that she can address them as well. And at the end of her presentation, we will have a question and answer time, followed by opening all the mics at the end of the service. So again, thanks everyone for coming today, and thank you so much, Jenn, for presenting. We are all ready to go.
All right, thank you very much, Joan, and thank you everyone for inviting me this morning. It's terrific to see all these faces. Some of them I've seen many times. Hi, Horst and Susie and Rosemary, and other folks who may have seen my presentation before. Some of this might be familiar. I do, with the serving on the task force, what I'm going to be presenting is some of the information that was presented to us. I'm also going to talk about our changing energy system in general, and then I'm going to go into the specifics of some of the recommendations, and I'm going to close with what is coming up next. In just the next couple of months, there's actually going to be some, in fact, next week, there's even an opportunity here in the UP to interact with some of the decision makers around our energy system. So I'm going to provide you with those resources at the end. And as Joan said, do please put your questions in the chat. I really want to make sure that during this time we're all together, I can help folks come to understand our many layered and complex energy system. Although I'm also going to recognize that I'm sure some of you have been working in this even longer than I have, and I really welcome your feedback and insights as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start the sharing of screen now. So just let me get that going. Oh. I need to share screen first. There we go. And okay, can folks see the slide?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to start with this image of how the Upper Peninsula has been absolutely critical to the energy system of the entire United States. On the left is the image of the hammerstones that were used by the Anishinaabe to take advantage of the minerals, of course, we have right here in the ground. That is a pit over on Isle Royal, and those stones were used to, to meld, change the copper and use it as they could, and also use it as a trading material, of course, across the United States, or what became the United States. For thousands of years, people have been doing that. And then on the upper right is the image, of course, when the Europeans came, and how we transformed the land of the UP into a product that literally electrified, particularly the eastern part of our country and our nation, and that absolutely essential to the development of our entire nation is what our land is. The bottom image is a dam being built in Crystal Falls, and that dam is still developing, still delivering power today, and it's approaching its 100th birthday. So the land and the water of the Upper Peninsula has been fundamental to our energy system for a very long time. And what I want to go over today is how we've continued to use these resources and how it looks like it's going to change in the future. So I don't know when folks were last in Marquette, but the two power plants that were defined and provided our electricity for both the city, the mines, and much of Marquette County are now both gone. And just in the space from basically 2017 to 2021, 4 years, the fundamental energy source was decommissioned, a new source put in, and not just decommissioned, but also taken away. And both of these are now both gone. And what is interesting about these coal plants is to think about the chain of events that have to happen for them to actually function. Because how they worked is that they took what was in the ground, mostly in Wyoming, somewhat in Appalachia, but in the end, it was mostly Wyoming coal that had to come out of the ground, go onto a truck, go onto a train, go onto a boat, and then come here and then be burned. And I learned by attending the Board of Light and Powers board meetings, every time a coal boat, this is the Shiras plant that powered Marquette, every time a coal boat came in to Marquette, $1.1 million left Marquette. That's how much money we had to spend in the chain to go back. And that happened in the wintertime. Well, of course they had to have a pile for when the lakes closed. But roughly we were spending approximately $7, $8, $9 million, depending, on coal alone. And of course, that money just went back out the chain to the boats, to the trains, back to Wyoming, back to those corporations. So it functioned very well for 100 years. It allowed for, better or worse, the development that we have had in the last, since Europeans came. We also had some hydropower here.
On the slider.
So this system that worked really, really well, that we honed to a point where it was really for our time quite efficient. And in fact, the plant at Shiras was one of the most efficient coal plants built. It was built just in the early 80s, and yet we no longer need it. What's happening? Why change? Well, there was a tremendous unintended consequence of using that coal, which is that it is causing greenhouse gas emissions, which is warming our atmosphere, which is causing our climate to change. How can we influence that change to prevent some of the destruction that is already happening around us? Well, a lot of research has been done, and the primary sources of emissions, I didn't want to go fast. The primary sources of emissions is transportation and then buildings, residential and commercial buildings. Certainly industry is important, but in the UP in particular, because our industry is fairly limited, I'm going to focus on transportation and buildings. I'm going to pause here. Do you have any questions, Joan, that I might want to be aware of?
No questions yet.
Okay, thank you. So if there's anything I hope you remember from today, is that the energy system really has 3 decision points, 3 poles that pull it in different directions. First, there's of course physics. Burning something generates heat. We were talking about incandescent light bulbs, right? That is electric resistance causing not just the light to be emitted, but the heat to be emitted. Then we have who decides and how those resources flow. The politics is who decides, the business is what the resource flows are, and then they have to interact with the physics. And this system, the wheels are not necessarily the best metaphor. I also found this very sophisticated diagram here of how our energy system works. We have the physics holding up, the center, but then it gets pulled on either side by who's making the decisions and what the resource flows are. Is it going to be Wyoming to a truck, to a train, to a boat? Is it going to be Kentucky or West Virginia to a train, to a boat, to our facilities? Those resource flows are decisions that can be changed. The physics, probably not going to change. We're getting better at adapting to it, I would say, or the technology can take advantage of different parts of the physics, but of course the physics is pretty fundamental. But these other things are going to keep pulling on the system. And so understanding that there's a three poles in the system, I think can help folks better understand how things came to be the way they are and how things are going to change. And change they are. I literally just took this screenshot about 15 minutes ago. This is our grid and what is being proposed as future energy sources. So when we talk about the grid, we're in something called the Mid-Continent Service Region. All of these states are connected to each other. And in a pool that actually functions, it's really an auction house. And so the things like coal plants, nuclear plants, the big wind generators, the big wind farms, they are bidding in to the grid to say, hey, use my resource first. I'm the best value for you to get your energy. And then what this image represents is what the future investments in our grid are likely to be. So you'll see there's this picture, there's 495 yellow dots of proposed solar on this system. And then the gray is battery storage and hybrid, which is a combination of, it's a combination of fuels, mostly industrial, to be honest. And then the green is wind and the blue is natural gas. The numbers in the parentheses are what those numbers were 6 months ago when I gave a presentation in June on this same information. So, what's happened? So part of it is a little bit artificial in that it's called you'll see it's called the interconnection queue. This is the line to get into the system, and there has to be analysis done. So it was to a company's advantage to get in before December 31st. So part of what you're seeing is not all of these are going to be built, but this is companies saying, I have a stake in my projects moving forward. And they have paid thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the project, to get into this queue. Now, again, that auction house, it's a nonprofit. It doesn't make a profit on this. It's operating as a clearinghouse and auction house to manage all of this information that it then presents back out to operators who are pulling down to meet the demand, i.e. the utility companies. So I'm going to pause here too, because that was a lot of information. Does anyone, do folks generally understand? Anyone want to have any questions about this? Okay. So like I said, not all of these are going to be built, but some good percentage of them are. And what really jumped out at me in doing this morning That is by far the highest number of battery storage I have seen. I've been giving this presentation now for 4 or 5 years. I have never, I thought 62 was a lot of battery storage. To have it have gone up to 172, the capacity is really changing right now around the ability to store energy. Okay, I see there's actually 2 things in the chat. Are there?
One comment is batteries are not a source of energy.
Oh, right. Yes, right. They will function as they help tremendously with the intermittent ability to produce energy. So you're going to be able to pull energy back. You put energy into them, and then you'll be able to pull energy back out of them. And depends on the scale. There's a lot of information behind making those decisions, but there is the capacity to support the system within those batteries, which just frankly didn't exist before, which is why we had to rely on burning stuff. And with the battery, we don't have to rely so much right now, and it's again changing so much on actually burning it in the moment. We can have things be stored.
And Jen, another comment is, what is the auction house?
The auction house is called, is up here in this MISO. I'm not going to get the acronym correct, but it's Mid-Continent Interconnection Service Organization, I believe. But it is this, like I said, it's literally a 501c3. It's a nonprofit, and they have lots and lots of technical staff who manage the flow of information. They have real-time data on their website of how much energy is being produced in this whole grid, the whole thing, and by what fuel source. So if you Google MISO Energy, MISO Energy, you can go and see that all in real time. It's
and
amazing.
one more, again, just for clarification, the batteries are tied to wind and solar, right? So basically it's making them more.
They're not actually.
Okay.
I want to be careful about tie. Excuse me. Sorry. But it's even more, the company that manages the battery storage is probably a different company than who's operating the wind and solar. They are bidding into the auction and are serving as a different resource than the wind and solar, but are there to, because everyone's bidding in at the same time to say, you know, use me at this time. So it's not, they call it tie, but it's not as direct as that. It's a system level resource, not necessarily tied directly to one particular, although it can be tied to one particular energy generator.
Would you say that the fact of having battery storage is certainly going to make solar and wind much more competitive?
Exactly. Yes. Yes, that is true. Very good. Okay. So having, I do have, this is what is being proposed more directly in our region. I'm sure you're aware of the wind happening up in your part of the world. There's solar being proposed. There is still a natural gas plant being proposed here. It's been in the queue though for years and has not moved forward. I'm not sure. We'll see. It does take a long time to move through the queue. It takes at least 6 months, and there's that's another whole conversation about how things move through the queue. And but this is what's being proposed in our region. Now, to go a little bit more about our grid, the grid is broken. So here's, the MISO. We are in zone 2, and you see that we're connected most directly with eastern Wisconsin. There's a piece over at the Lake this is actually Lake Gogebic, and just south of Waters Meet. West is part of zone 1. The folks who are served by Northern Energy Power, which is a subsidiary of Excel Energy, and which is actually the same company, the Excel that you might have heard about with the fires in Boulder, that electric company is also the same. And they have determined that it was not the utility poles falling over that started the fire. It seems to have been something else. So there's these webs of utilities across the country, but we are zone 2, and we are served by electric utilities that do not operate in the lower peninsula. So there is a little bit of energy that flows between the peninsulas, but most of what's going on for us happens right here. Now, so this is my last sort of piece on the big system. I saw one more thing might have come in.
Yeah, John Vollmer would like to ask a question.
Sure. No? Oh, okay.
Sorry, the machine mistook my posture for raising my hand.
Okay. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go into the specifics of the Upper Peninsula. And we're going to start with my basement. So I bought this house here in the city of Marquette in 2015. The original furnace was still in. It suffered a leak about 6 months after we got it in March of 2016. And our trusty EPA certified Napoleon stove built in Canada heated our house for 2 weeks because the previous owners had put in some duct work so that the heat from the bottom of the house actually goes into the top. And so I raise this because the notion that wind and solar is not always on, or we aren't, with the coal in particular and nuclear, they're all, we're running them 90% of the time, and then the 10% of the time there's backing them down and turning them off is quite the process, and it can take 2 weeks to turn them on and off. So it's not like the old system was, 100% on all the time. It actually wasn't. There are different ways that we have to have redundancy built into the system. And what's going to happen with the redundancy that's available with battery, wind, and solar is that time of use is going to become increasingly important, because there's going to be more, this has already happened in California, excess capacity when the sun is shining. And so that excess capacity is going to need to be, can be stored in the system in actually a whole bunch of different ways. There's a whole bunch of different ways of looking at batteries. There's also reducing demand, because the cheapest way to not spend money on energy is to not need it in the first place. So again, to go back to our conversation that we were having about incandescent light bulbs versus the LEDs, the reason you want to shift down to shift over to the LED is that it does take substantially less electric to generate that same amount of light, because it's not putting the energy into heat that just gets dissipated. It does mean, of course, that you have to have some other heat source, but in terms of actually having light or the power to run your computer, your refrigerator, your television, those things, there's a more direct route. And so we're actually going to need less energy actually coming into the home to do the same amount of lighting, heating, cooking in switching to all electric. But then there's going to be different times a day where we all want electricity at the same time. When we wake up in the morning, in particular, there's going to be, there's a spike. We wake up and we turn things on, and the coffee pot's going, and the television's going, and the radio is going, and we're getting kids out of the house and all that kind of stuff. That work, we might want to really make sure that we have to make sure we have enough energy for all that to happen, and then it's going to ramp down a little bit. And so just like we used to have with phone rates, where I knew when I went away to college, I went away several states away, I called my friends back home after 10 o'clock because that's when the long distance rates went down, right? I know, call after 10, it was always, or 5 o'clock, things went down, the rates went down after 5 o'clock. We're going to move into an electric system that also has some of that same function, because again, it's about managing the demand and having the capacity in the system to take on the bigger load at different times. So who's taking care of us in the UP? As you might know, we have a pretty complicated system. This is the names of them all, but what's important is to know that we have 3 different types. So we have the rural electric co-ops since FDR and the New Deal, where we were the end of the line and we got electrified, and thanks in large part to the federal government coming and actually making sure that the lines got put out to the homes that wanted them. Then we have the municipal utilities, which range in size from Marquette down to places like Daggett and Wakefield, where often what happened there is the system that was built by the mine or the mill that was nearby, at some point in the last 80 years, that system was transferred to the local municipality. And then we have 4, I say 4 because We Energy is 2 parts. They have the investor-owned utilities, UPCO, Excel over in the west, and then Umric, We Energies down on the border. And it's how we interact with those. The investor-owned utilities have a profit. They have the right to have a monopoly called the franchise agreement, and they are regulated by the Michigan Public Service Commission. So there are 3 individuals who in the end are the ones making the decisions through a judicial-like process around the regulations for their rates and how they decide how to invest going forward. The rural electric co-ops and the municipal utilities, that's controlled by us right here in the UP. There's not anybody else but us making those decisions and the people in those communities. And I'm going to say this more, but this is a great place to get engaged if you're concerned about what's going on and going forward, is to step up and be start asking questions and maybe even get engaged in their leadership, because this is really important in terms of how we manage the UP's energy system going forward. With the investor-owned utilities, it's more like you're going to it's a statewide thing. You're going to a statewide organization that has decision makers that are appointed by the governor. And just one more sense of how complicated it is. My mom is a quilter. I don't know that she's even as creative to come up with a pattern that looks like this for the UP. Maybe she would. She's a pretty creative woman, but that's a pretty creative way of dividing up the Upper Peninsula. And it just reflects things that have changed, right? Where a mine or a mill may have been 150 years ago. It reflects who knew who. I know even here in Marquette Township or Marquette County, literally there are places in town where one side of the street is one utility and the other side of the street is a different utility. So it's a pretty complicated thing to have to manage. And so that just it adds to some of the complexities that we're dealing with here. But I will say over here where it's all white, that's Cloverland Electric Co-op. And what they have is they get the power from the dam and the hydro at the Sioux, right? So this system is pretty contained. This system is quite, there's a lot of overlap going on over here on the from central to west.
Jen, a couple questions.
Yeah.
First, there's a comment that the map that you showed earlier didn't include the natural gas facility in Pelkey. So something you can look at.
Oh, I think it just changed. Was that the one that was the oil one that blew up? If somebody can clarify that for me, I will.
Catherine? She can put it in the chat.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
And then another comment, are there energy co-ops and do they get any priority?
So, yeah, I sigh because Michigan has made some of the ability to form an energy co-op harder, frankly, in my opinion, than it needs to be. And so some people are really trying to change that around, particularly around community solar. I can say, for example, I know up in Big Bay, up in Powell Township, they actually have a joint agreement to buy their propane together. And so they get a better deal because they've got more than 100 homes that buy their propane all at once. And so that does happen. And I know there are other co-ops like the one in Bruce Crossing. And I know there's some out in the east too, the farmer co-ops, where there's joint purchasing going on. But that's more around, tends to be around propane. But where that might happen, and there's the Lance example of community solar, and there's work right now happening, and that's one of the things coming up, on changing community solar so we can have solar as a co-op resource as well. Okay.
And then folks should check the chat. There's a couple links to the, I'm not sure, did you call it MISO?
Yeah, MISO,
okay,
yeah.
energy. Yep. So there's a link there. And then Connie Julian also provided a link to battery storage for home solar.
Great, thank you. So just as we all know, especially folks who are served by UPCO, sorry, hit that wrong button. That green X is the Michigan average for our rates, and the most UP utilities, whether they're the investor owned and regulated or whether they're controlled by us here locally, which is what the blue ones are, most of the UP except for Lance, Gladstone, Baraga, and Escanaba are paying more than the state average. So that's a problem. Not good for our people and not good for our economic development. So I'm going to actually skip through these and go on to, this is one opportunity that we have is to put the solar on a brownfield so it's not going on to land that may have ecological purposes, more beneficial ecological purposes. There's research that's already been done for both Houghton County and Marquette County on where this could be and how much potential solar there is. I just want to raise people's awareness of that. And it's another place where you might want to do more research and see if there's opportunities for this to happen in your part of the world. And
how long would it have to be viable? Like if you're going to clean up that brownfield, then you have to move the solar?
These are, well, what you can do is put the cap on top, put 9 inches of soil on top and put them up and plant, and then have the roots of the plant doing uptake, which can take 50 years. But the solar panels work for 20 to 30 years. So we have to think in some longer timescales when you're thinking about energy production. But that is possible to have it happening at the same time. It depends very much on what's going on at the site and what the particular issues are. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to switch now to the Energy Task Force. So again, we've reviewed some of the system things. We've reviewed what some of the technology questions are and what some of the potential is. In June 2019, the governor invited 17 of us to talk about and share information and hear from energy companies about what's going on. So the picture on top is when we met up in Hancock, in the fall of 19. And then this picture is over at Lake Superior State over in the Sioux, back when we could still meet in person. So our last in-person meeting was March 2020. It was literally the day that I found out about the shutdown. Was we were at the Bark River Harris Casino, the Hannahville Casino that day. And so we were 17 people, 12 people were Yoopers. And in particular, I want to call out that's Major General Paul Rogers, who's Calumet Michigan Tech grad, now in charge of Michigan's National Guard, is there in his uniform. They had the director of the environmental agencies, Eagle, was there, the head of the Michigan Public Service Commission, and many other folks involved in energy. Dave Camps there, you might know him, he's in Hancock. And who are the other? We had a propane, this gentleman owned a propane company in Rudyard. We had, yeah, so anyway, it was a great group of people, very thoughtful, asking lots and lots of questions. And in particular, when we were up in Hancock, we heard from Enbridge, and we heard from Plains Midstream, which is the company that actually owns what's inside the pipelines. One of the things I learned serving on the committee was that the Line 5 pipeline, the actual pipe, is what's owned by Enbridge. What's inside the pipe is owned by this company, Plains Midstream. So that makes Enbridge liable should there be a leak, but the actual stuff flowing inside is owned by another company. So what we found, just really quickly on the propane question, these are all the different propane terminals that are within, I think it was 500 miles or more of all of Michigan. So there's a lot of propane terminals out there. Propane is a growing business. So we learned about that. This is the pipeline system that serves just propane. And the most important thing to know is this right here. Most propane, we produce America because of fracking, because of the horizontal drilling and what we've learned in the last, now it's I think 30 or 40 years, about how to get the last little bits of petrochemical energy out of the ground. We produce way more fuel than we need. And so we've become a huge exporter of particularly natural gas. And that is going to Asia and Europe to help fuel their economies. So the prices we're paying for propane are no longer just relying on what the weather was this year, or even the crop drying that needs to happen in the areas where we have corn, and they need a lot of propane to dry the corn so it can go into a silo and be sold when it's more, when it's needed in the spring. Those used to be the things that drove the price of propane primarily, and now it is very much a global commodity. So the question of things coming through the pipeline and ending up in Sarnia, there's actually, it's ending up also going out into these, out to the coast, in particular over here by Philadelphia. It's, there's a new pipeline to make sure that this product is getting to international markets, or it's getting on a boat and it's going out the seaway. So the propane question is a very complex one around what the global world is doing. And you could see that too with the coming of COVID and how prices fell as the whole economy contracted. But now that the whole economy, at least before Omicron, was really trying to get started again, there was a bigger demand, prices started to go up again. And again, that wasn't just because of what's happening in the US and Canada, that was very much what was also going on in the rest of the world. Okay. So I'm going to switch now to talk about what we can do in the Upper Peninsula. Again, to lessen our reliance on fossil fuels. And I'm going back to that pie chart of buildings and transportation that we had, as I will say again, a lot of folks worked really, really hard to create a system that worked in many ways to create a very comfortable way of life for not everyone, but for many people. But that burning of fossil fuels emitted greenhouse gases, carbons, methane, into our atmosphere, which is not escaping, and it's tightening and tightening, it's increasing the amount of energy in our atmosphere. And we're getting, 241 tornadoes in December. We're getting the horrible fires. We're getting the drought. We're getting the swings of weather. So to address that, what we can do is electrify. And in changing our systems to be run entirely on electricity, we then green the electricity system. The short soundbite is clean energy can travel on a wire. Dirty energy travels in a pipe. So this is one of those generational changes that's equivalent to literally going from the horse and buggy to a car. And of course, there were electric cars in the early 1900s, and we're coming around back to them again as well. So, but this change from burning things in every building that we build to making sure that every building that we build has electricity and retrofitting it is the next big challenge. And there's a technology called heat pumps that will allow for more of the work to be done with electricity. So the answer to how many heat pumps do you use every day is probably 3, because a refrigerator is a heat pump. A dryer, whether it's gas or electric, is actually a heat pump, because what it's doing is taking the difference in temperature inside the unit and outside the unit and taking advantage of that difference through a chemical reaction to then either heat or cool with the same appliance. So basically, a heat pump for your house is a dryer. It's pretty much the same equipment in some ways, that is going to generate enough pull. It doesn't generate. It's taking advantage of that temperature difference to bring the energy into the home without having to burn anything. It's just a chemical reaction. So that allows us. Well, here, sorry. Yeah, so here's an image. I'll let you guys look at this. The value is heating, because of course we need heating up here, but there's also going to be an increasing need for air conditioning. It's only getting warmer, right? Even the last few summers, right, have gotten warmer and warmer. And with one, rather than having to put things in the window and taking them in and taking them out and all of that, you put in a heat pump, and it can take care of both heating and cooling. And it will run on electricity. So the way that you deal with, I'll start. The heat pumps are now capable of heating an entire home down to about -5, which of course isn't enough for us in many parts of Canada and the US and other parts of the world. But put in on top of the old system, so that the old system, which is less efficient than a heat pump. And the old system, which relies on fossil fuels, which we want to greatly reduce because we don't want, we can pull down and stop some of the dangers of climate change, is to put a heat pump into the home. It can be done, not just, it can be done for the whole house, but it can also be done room to room. A heat pump is also the, when you go to a hotel room and there's that thing that looks like an air conditioner under the window and you can turn it on from heat to cold, that's a heat pump. It's called a mini split, or a ductless heat pump. And you could put those in particular parts of your house, in a shed, in a shop, in the garage, that allows you to take advantage of this chemical reaction to have the heating and the cooling. And you can put that in on top of your system and use less carbon and have probably a warmer house, because you can also arrange them where you need them. So it's and there's going to be new units coming out even in 2022 and 2023, just as I said, like with the cars, where we are rapidly moving, where the auto companies are saying we are no longer going to build internal combustion engines. We are only going to build electric. So, where am I? Oh gosh, I'm over. Okay, so I just want to say this is an image from the Pentagon, the Department of Defense. The military understands that that we need to be more self-reliant, and this renewable energy is the way to make that happen. And this is my new friend. We're basically in that stage where cell phones were new. Many of us, right? Most of us are probably, spent most of our lives without cell phones. But cell phones are now, many of us, not everybody, but most of us are carrying that cell phone around, whether we want it or not. And here we are, and learning to take advantage of this new technology. I'll close with the 3 upcoming opportunities. So remember I said there's 3 people in charge of our utility decision making. They're going to be in Iron Mountain on Tuesday. So if you're available, I invite you to come down. This hearing is going to be specifically about the planning for UMRIC's upcoming energy needs. But I'm sure they want to come up to the UP as much as they can. Last I heard, it was going to be in person. There is not, of course, masked, but all systems are it's going to be in a big room. One of the big teaching rooms at the Bay College. Should be safe. I haven't heard if there's going to be an online component. I will let folks know if there is, but all 3 of them are going to be here on Tuesday. There is also something starting this month called the MI Michigan Green Communities Challenge. And this is how to support your local government at whatever scale, township, village, city, county, helping them improve their performances around carbon emissions. And there's going to be a lot of support, and this is a way for people to talk to each other at scale. So the little townships and all across Michigan can all talk to each other, and the big guys can all talk to their folks. You don't have to sit and listen to how they can get things done in Ann Arbor, which they're doing a great job. They're doing a great job in Ann Arbor, but there's maybe a few more resources in Ann Arbor than here. And so there's a lot we can learn from each other. And I highly, highly encourage folks to get involved in this. It's going to be really terrific. And then last thing, Governor Whitmer announced that in September of 2020, that Michigan is going to meet the Paris Climate Agreement, the worldwide treaty to reduce carbon emissions. And so that's what this executive order on climate solutions and building a carbon neutral Michigan and responding to climate change. This is all being at the state level. The draft of the climate plan is going to come out next month. You can sign up on this website of Office in Climate and Energy to get the notifications, get the report, make your comments, please be part of the process. They need to hear from the UP. Sometimes, too often, I'm the only one in the room, or Horst and I want to be clear, Horst and I are the only ones in the room. It would be wonderful to have more representation. You mightn't feel like you don't know enough, but you know the UP. You know about living here, and that's what folks need to hear. And they want to. They do. The Whitmer administration wants to hear from us. So I please encourage you to be a part of. If you can come on Tuesday, that'd be wonderful. I'll be there. Be part of the My Green Communities. Be part of the My Climate Healthy Plan. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for going over. I get excited about this stuff. I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thanks so much. Folks, if you want to, you could raise your hand, put it in
Okay,
the
I'll
chat.
stop
or
sharing